got to do. You can't just say, well, I love you, I believe you. Now, it's one thing, you know, we do many things we don't know.
That's what I was about to ask you that.
We don't know. But if you think about it, you should be trying to find out. That's, I hope I'm going to get you with that, because you trying to say, what about those who don't know?
Yeah, like what if, because
you
just said that it's...
Yeah, let me get, I got you. Yeah, I understand. Let me finish this right here. If you could turn, still in Matthew, if you turn to the 15th chapter. Matthew the 15th chapter. And here we got an example of what you're talking about. We got some people who are religious people now. They done made up something now. So now it says in verse 1, Matthew 15:1. Matthew 15:1. It says, then came to Jesus scribes and Pharisees which were of Jerusalem, saying. Matthew 15, chapter 15, and verse 1. Yeah, them pages, man. My Bible is sticking together. There you go. Matthew 15 and verse 1. It said, then came to Jesus scribes and Pharisees which were of Jerusalem, saying, why do thy disciples transgress, which means to break, the tradition of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. So now these Pharisees, which was the same sect, religious sect that Paul the Apostle was a part of, and the scribes, they understand, or they were quite familiar with the law of God, the law, statutes, commandments, ordinances, the judgments of God, the Torah, the instruction. They grew up in that. But they worried about some tradition of men. And they say, why don't your followers or disciples wash their hands before they eating bread? Now, it's probably good to wash your hands. That's hygienic, right? Mm-hmm. That's not a law in the Bible, though. Okay? So they uphold this tradition, and then what does Jesus do? As he did so many times, he checks them. And what he says is, but he answered and said unto them, why do ye also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? So the same thing can be applied to Sunday worship. You think you're doing something, but number one, we understand it's a tradition of man. It's not found in the Bible. So it's a tradition of man, and not only that, you transgressing his actual law by keeping that tradition of man. So which one you going to uphold? You going to uphold the tradition of man, which say, I'm going to go every Sunday, I love you, which he didn't establish, you can't read it, or you going to actually do what he said to do, which is keep the Sabbath day. That's what the same thing, the same exact thing. They uphold the tradition of man. Sunday worship is a tradition of man, or originated through Sunday or sun worship. So it says, for God commanded, saying, honor thy father and mother, I'm in verse 4. So it says, for God commanded, saying, honor thy father and mother, and he that curseth father or mother, let him die the death. But ye say, so we read, going back to one of the 10, honor thy father and thy mother. That's the one commandment with promise, that your days may be long in the land. But ye say, whosoever shall say to his father or mother, it is a gift, by whatsoever thou mightest be profited by me. In other words, he's saying, you could do it, but it's a gift. He didn't give it with condition, though. He said, honor your father and your mother. He didn't say, honor your father and your mother if you want to. But that's what they were saying. So they came up with some traditions. So he says, and honor not his father or his mother, he shall be free. Thus have you made the commandment of God of none effect by your tradition. So in implementing these traditions, you're actually transgressing God's law. So you got to find out which one is more important. Is it God's law or man's tradition? So he says, ye hypocrites. Well did Isaiah, which is Isaiah, prophesy of you, saying, this people draw nigh unto me with their mouth, and honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. So I love you, God. That's what they said. They ain't like they saying, I hate you, Jesus, every Sunday. They say, I love you. But how you loving him and you ain't doing what he said to do? See, your actions don't match up with your words. That's like a man who said, baby, I love you, and he hit his wife in the eye. She said, that's not love. That's not love. Baby, you know I love you. Well, you sure got a funny way of showing her eyes. You sure got a funny way of showing it. I'm not mocking it. I'm just saying, like, that don't go together. If he love you, he don't even have to say he love you. You taken care of. You taken care of. You build the lights on, you ain't did nothing. The light, I mean, I ain't saying the woman don't do a lot of work. What I'm saying is, he'll take care of you. He'll die for you if he love you. He don't have to say it. That's like my grandfather. My grandparents died. They were married 66 years. And I witnessed this. My grandmother, called her Big Mama, she said, Abe, his name was Abraham, said, Abe, do you love me? He said, I'm still here, ain't I? He still was there for 66 years. He don't have to even say it. He's showing you. You see what I'm saying? So, but if he was doing something else besides taking care of her and taking care of all of us, then that's not love. So he said, these people draw nigh to me with their mouth. We love you. And honor me with their lips. We give you all honor. But their heart, their mind is far from you. Because they're not doing what he said. Then he said something. But in vain. That means for nothing. But in vain they do worship me. Teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. This is a prime example. So he's saying it's for nothing. That's why I said earlier, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Truth is, Sunday worship is not biblical. So you can't justify it. And that's something I had to deal with myself. I say, man, but I'm doing this my whole life. This is something I grew up in, and it was wrong. According to this. I hold this is not my opinion. Because you go by my opinion, then I wouldn't be reading to you. Over and over again.
Is that a King James Bible?
Yes. Oh, you got it. Thank you. Yes, it's a King James version. Yes.
No, it's the reason I asked that because they got so many Bibles, and they're still changing the Bibles to the way that the people in power want you to believe. So they're trying to get rid of the Bible so that you don't be following the Word of God. And that should tell people the things that are going on. If you're not aware of them, you know that we're in end times, and there's all kinds of things that are going on to change people.
Yeah, and you look at the Bibles, the many versions. You know, okay, so when Europeans got a hold of the scriptures and the New Testament writings, these were all written by Israelites who are black people. What happened is that the Catholic Church in particular, they tried to prevent anybody from being able to access it. And you had others, particularly English, who risked their lives and some were killed trying to translate it into English. Okay? What you have today are these many books. This is in the public domain. And what they're doing is they're changing it, they're taking verses out, and the reason they're doing that is because if they do that, they can make some money. So that's why they come out with a lot of the versions of the Bible on the surface. But let me answer your question, because your question was, what about for those who don't believe? Or didn't know, didn't know. Okay, so if you go with me, let's pick it up in Psalms, the 19th chapter. Psalms, the 19th chapter.
Well, you're looking at one of the things that happens is that if there's something that you don't know and you're truly trying to seek the truth, God will send somebody. They will send somebody to reveal to you what the truth is. Right, I understand that. What I'm just saying, so you have to have the desire, and if you have the desire, God will send somebody to reveal the truth to you or to answer your question, because your soul depends on it if you're truly seeking the truth.
That's right. You ain't said nothing wrong. Psalms the 19th division. Psalms 19. So, the first thing that all man, regardless of who you are, when I say man, I'm talking mankind, is that you need to understand is that there's a God. Okay? So Psalms 19:1, it said, the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament show of his handiwork. So the creation is evidence of God or a creator. So it's just like if you see a book, if you walk into this room, nobody's in here, and you see a book, you can make all kind of assumptions. One is that there's a publisher somewhere, right? It didn't just come out of nothing. So you, me, this creation, us in here, we didn't come out of just nothing. Someone created us, right? And the creation is evidence of that, and we see it wherever we're at throughout all of man's existence. Throughout the annals of time, it's evident. But then it says something here. So, because if you see that, you could be a little babies. They didn't understand. Or they not babies no more. But
Yes, they are.
they don't. You don't have to be too old to understand that God exists, right? So if there's a creator, if there's someone higher than you, your next logical step is to say, what do you desire of me? That's why so many people deny the existence of God, because they don't want to do that part. So they come up with all these, well, you know we came from a common ancestor, which they had no evidence for. You know we came from primordial soup. You know we didn't transition, we came from lower beings. All these things that don't make sense to get around the fact that no, you have to answer to somebody. So once you see, so right there, it's been a universal revelation of God. He came to one people specifically with his law, but he's shown you that he exists through the creation. So that's why he goes on, after he shows you the creation in verse 7, he said the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. So this one has a standard. And like my elder said here, you need to be seeking him. So really, nobody has an excuse. Because you know it's a God. You can be blind, but you can hear the birds. You can be deaf, but you can feel the trees. So you know it's something there. Bigger than you, bigger than mama and daddy, bigger than big mama and big daddy, right? So now, that's where you need to go, is you need to find out. But now let's go to Romans, the 2nd chapter, just to deal specifically with what you said. And then I go to what my elder said as well. Romans, the 2nd chapter, in verse... Romans, this is after the book of Acts. You got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you got Acts, and you got Romans. Romans, the 2nd chapter.
Go ahead, I'll find it.
Okay. Romans, the 2nd chapter, in verse, just going to the heart of the matter. Well, actually, let me read into it. He says in verse 11, he says, well, there's no respect of persons with God. Meaning anybody can be saved. It said, for as many as have sinned without law shall also perish without law. And as many as have sinned in the law shall be judged by the law. Okay? He said, for not the hearers of the law are just before God, but the doers of the law shall be justified. Then he said something. He said, for when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law, are a law unto themselves. So you actually are doing things contained in the law, and you don't have a concept necessarily of what the law is or what was written. You just know that certain things are wrong. See, truly your conscience does tell you certain things that are contained in the law. It tells you you shouldn't murder. You really don't need a book for that. You know it's wrong. You know adultery is wrong. You know you're taking something that's wrong. A lot of stuff we do in secret, we try to do it, sneak around because we know it's wrong. So the law doesn't tell you. You may have met people who genuinely try to be good people based on what they know, and have a good spirit about them in a sense. They say, man, that's a nice person. They try to treat people with love and respect based on what they know. And that's the beautiful thing about the one we serve. He is a righteous judge. So he could judge you with what you know, by what you know. He's a righteous judge. Otherwise, he couldn't judge properly. See, that's why I say too much is given, much is required. You know better. That's why I talked about Moses earlier. He didn't get into the promised land. Why didn't he get into the promised land? Because he didn't give God proper honor in one instance. When he said, must we get fetch water from the rock, from you rebels, and struck the rock without acknowledging that God is the one that did it. And he said, you're not going to enter the promised land. He showed him the land, and he died. It said he died in his strength. It's not like he died and got old and he didn't get shot. Nothing happened. He just took him out. You see what I'm saying? Because much is given, much is required. So he can look at you based on what you know. But we all need to be seeking. And like my elder said, when you are seeking, because you should be seeking, he'll send somebody to you. Now that's in the book before this in Acts. Just to show you an example of this.
And there are men that are in prison that can read the Bible and not miss a word, but they can't read any other Bible. They can't read any other book. So the Holy Spirit, before you leave this earth, you have a choice on who you're going to follow. And if you're hungry for the knowledge of God, He's going to send the Spirit to reveal it to you.
Acts the 8th chapter and verse 26. Acts the 8th chapter. So you got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Then you got Acts of the Apostles, chapter 8 and verse 26. It says, and the angel of the Lord spake unto Philip, saying,
Acts 8 and 26?
yes. Acts 8, thank you. Acts 8:26. It says, and the angel of the Lord spake